Let's go ahead and begin with lesson 52, boys and girls. Now touch the letters as you be in part 1. When those letters appear at the beginning of a word, they usually mean under or less than. Touch the first word in the column. First word. What word? Submerge. Submerge means to go under. Touch the next word. What word? Submit. Submit means to yield or to put yourself under somebody else's will. Touch the next word. What word? Substandard. Substandard means below standard or less than standard. Touch the next word. What word? Subtract. Subtract means to make the amount less. Now, let's go ahead and look at part 2. So let's go ahead and continue with the first word in part 2. First word. What's the underlined part? Oh, what word? Moaning. Next word. What's the underlined part? What word? Semicircle. Next word. What's the underlined part? Lee. What word? Wildly. Next word. What's the underlined part? Re. What word? Released. Next word. What's the underlined part? Shh. What word? Thrashing. Next word. What's the underlined part? Shun. What word? Infection. Next word. What's the underlined part? E. What word? Heaving. Next word. What's the underlined part? What word? Breathed. Next word. What's the underlined part? What word? Either. Next word. What's the underlined part? What word? Leisurely. Next word. What's the underlined part? X. What word? Experienced. Next word. What's the underlined part? A. What word? Flail. Let's go ahead and look at part 3. We're going to talk about what those words mean. Word number 1. What word? Ribs. Where are your ribs? They are in your chest, boys and girls. Word number 2. What word? Shrill. A shrill sound is a high-pitched sound. Everybody, what's another way of saying the whistle made a high-pitched sound? Get ready. The whistle made a shrill sound. Word number 3. What word? Trample. When you trample something, you stamp it into the ground. Everybody, what's another way of saying she stamped the grass into the ground? Get ready. She trampled the grass. Let's go ahead and look at part 4. First word. What word? Strength. Next word. What word? Knocked. Next word. What word? Silent. Next word. What word? Injured. Next word. What word? Struck. Next word. What word? Flicking. Next word. What word? Message. Next word. What word? Normal. Next word. What word? Lowered. Next word. What word? Powerful. Next word. What word? Locomotive. Next word. What word? Seriously. Next word. What word? Finished. Next word. What word? Occasionally. Next word. What word? Scavengers. Next word. What word? Fallen. Next word. What word? Settled. Next word. What word? Meanwhile. Let's go ahead and begin with our story, boys and girls. So the title of the story is The Tyrannosaur Attacks. Let's go ahead and begin. Make sure we're tracking. Fight. Teklet's instincts told her, fight without fear. Teklet charged after the Tyrannosaur, who now had its jaws firmly planted in the male's back. The male was trying to turn to face the Tyrannosaur, but the Tyrannosaur had a firm hold on his back. Tekla lowered her head and charged with all her strength. Like all dinosaurs, her back legs were bigger and more powerful than her front legs, and she pushed so hard against the soft ground near the water hole that she made footprints over a foot deep. She pushed with all her strength. Faster, move faster, her instincts told her. Her two large horns struck the Tyrannosaur in the side. One broke the Tyrannosaur's lowest rib. The other entered the side of its belly. Both horns went in their full length. Tekla had hit the Tyrannosaur so hard that the ground shook. The Tyrannosaur released its grip on the young male, let out a shrill roar, and fell over kicking wildly. The two other Triceratops charged from the water hole almost as quickly as the Tyrannosaur had fallen over. It stood up again, wildly flailing its tail and jumping around like a huge kangaroo. Tekla stood her ground with her head down. As the Tyrannosaur lowered its head to strike at Tekla's neck, she charged again, this time planting her two large horns in the Tyrannosaur's soft belly. At the same time, the Triceratops that had been in the water hole charged forward, one on either side of the Tyrannosaur. The Tyrannosaur went down as the 6 horns torn into its sides with the force of a locomotive. Meanwhile, the injured male Triceratops stood and watched. It tried to move forward, but it was seriously injured. It would die before the sunset. The Tyrannosaur was on its back, roaring and thrashing its tail from side to side. The tail struck one of the Triceratops and knocked it over. One of the other Triceratops charged and struck the fallen Tyrannosaur in the neck. Another charged and drove its horns into the predator's side. Just when it seemed as if the Tyrannosaur was finished, the giant animal rolled to one side and snapped at Tekla with frightening speed. Its huge jaws caught her front shoulder, right below her armor plate. The Tyrannosaur released the grip when the other Triceratops charged and struck it in the side of the head. Suddenly, the plain was silent. The Tyrannosaur lay on its back, flicking its tail from time to time. The 4 Triceratops stood in a semicircle facing their fallen enemy. The birds settled along the shore of the water hole, and many dinosaurs returned, acting as if nothing had happened. Some of them walked near the fallen Tyrannosaur without even looking at it. It was almost as if a message had gone out to all the animals that the danger had passed and things were back to normal. The 4 Triceratops stood over the Tyrannosaur for about a minute. Then Tekla and 2 others turned away and returned to the water hole. The injured male didn't follow. It stood there bleeding, its head down, and its sides heaving every time it breathed. Long after Tekla and the other Triceratops left the water hole and returned to grazing, the injured male stood there. At last it laid down as some of the smaller predators and scavengers moved in the great feast that night. The grass around the 2 fallen dinosaurs had been trampled when the sun came up the next morning. Only a few of the larger bones of the Tyrannosaur and the male Triceratops marked the spot where the battle had taken place. The animals had forgotten yesterday's battle. Tekla had several cracked bones and an infection, but she didn't remember the battle. She knew only that she could eat and rest. So after watching my video, make sure you complete lesson 52 and turn in your assignment, boys and girls.